Welcome to the Shifting Realities podcast. I'm your host, Julie Allison, and with me is my co host and friend, Robert Perry.
Good morning, Julie.
In this morning's podcast, we're going to look at some ways of finding out how we are resisting um, connecting with our guides. Remember, this series is all about how we can connect with guides, and want to really go into the myths, legends, the do's and don'ts about connecting with guides, so that we can ensure that everybody is connecting beautifully and safely. That's what we're all about, our mission.
Yeah.
So we're going to start off with this, what we sort of classing as resistance, and what we mean in this context, and some of the things we've come up with. So do you want to start, Rob, with some of your thoughts and, what's happened, what happened to you in your experience of when you first wanted, I want to connect with my guides, just like me. What
Absolutely.
was your experience?
All sorts of things. And I love the word resistance in this sense because it was my own resistance that was stopping me. And there's resistance on so many levels. And I guess when you're starting to connect to guides or wanting to connect to guides, our rational human brains go, that's a bit odd. What will people make of me? And you start to stop yourself doing it because you don't know what people will think. You don't have anyone to talk to necessarily, or if you do, they might be on a similar wavelength, but then you go home and you don't know what to say to your family.
Mm.
And you want to talk about it because it's something you don't want to bottle. But equally, you don't want to be regarded as some kind of weirdo. Yeah. Which is so easy for people to think. And I understand it. I don't think I ever went through that phase of thinking people on a spiritual quest were weirdos, but I know plenty of people who do.
Mm.
And, it's how far can I push that envelope? How much can I tell people? And, we all live with filters in this day and age. So, I come home and what do I tell my wife or husband? How much can I share? And if I don't share, am I sort of negating something? So that's, I think, a big level of resistance, really.
Yeah.
I think perhaps a more salient point of resistance in connecting to guides is fear.
Oh, yes.
The
Mm.
word we always bring in, fear. And that's an interesting one to analyze, I think. And what I would like to suggest to people who are trying to connect upwards, trying to raise their vibration, trying to reach their guides, is if you feel it's not happening or you're not sure why it's not happening, try and feel in your body where that resonates. Is it in the pit of your stomach, which we call the solar plexus chakra, which is where fear sits? Is it lower down? Is it a sacral chakra? Have you some fear coming within your ancestral rootage? You know, is it higher up? Is it in your mind? Are you overthinking, being critical of yourself, being critical of this ability that you can connect? So, it can be all these things, or it can be one of these things, or two. But it's our natural response as 3D human beings not to go beyond the 3D. So the minute we start to cross the boundary, it's like, oh, I can't really. I shouldn't I? Well, I'm scared. And, you know, fit your own application to that as to what worried you when you first started this and how you get over it. So for me, the first thing to conquer resistance is understanding where you feel it
Mm.
and then doing some work on that area of your energy. Going within, back inside yourself, reading your body and going, okay, I feel this in the pit of my stomach. What am I afraid of? And just connecting to source and letting yourself, I think, get the message and processing and not rushing. What about you, Julie? What's resistance for
Yeah.
you?
I think, yeah, with resistance, there's a lot of with resistance. I remember doing a blog once with all the things that seemed like resistance, and people want to connect with guides, but the resistance there is the sort of the misunderstanding of what it means to actually connect with what we would class as guides. For one, knowing I'm going to say the external guides, or the guides that are, maybe with us, could be our ancestors, could be galactics, could be what we'd class as our spirit guides. It could be angelic guides. We can go into that. Many realms, many, let's say, dimensions. Um, the guides are residing in many of those. So we could, could literally talk to many of those, but we want to be able to do it with safety, with an absolute knowing that that is our guide. So a lot of people in resistance, we actually start off, we don't go within, we start off looking to the outside, or we start off with as Rob said, we've done this overthinking it. And I hear people a lot going, well, how can I connect with guides? How can I do this? And what do they look like? And what will my guide be like? And I want to connect with Archangel Michael. I want to channel because I've seen other people channeling. And can you see how the frustration in that people are very frustrated when
Hmm.
it comes to not being able to channel? The resistance as well is about they just think it's going to take a few minutes. I think a 5-minute
Yeah.
meditation and they'll be able to see a whole host of guides as we want to understand it. And really, what we've got to do to get rid of this resistance, let that go. As Rob said, what I learned so early on is to actually sit in the stillness, to go within, to sit in the stillness, ask a few questions, and that's okay. The questions aren't, how can I connect with guides? How can I do this? How can I do this? But it is how, you know, basically, or who am I? How would I connect? If I was in safety, connecting with myself, how would I connect with, my soul? Or how would I connect with my higher self? And then I sit in silence and ask. And this question, the solution to this question, let's call it a solution, may come days, weeks after. And you've got to be very patient. So with resistance comes a lot of frustration, a lot of impatience here. Plus the fact of what we expect guides to look like or be like or sound like. And there's a lot of get a lot of people when they first come to me and want to connect with the guides. I've said before, they want something to happen in the 3D. I want them to pop in front of me and I want them to look a certain way, or I want to see them in a certain way. And then we get disappointed, and it again, another resistance is the frustration that I'm not seeing anything. But they'll actually feel, something will happen to the bodies and they'll feel it inside. And that's absolutely great because that's come to them without even trying. But we just try too much to go with what we expect, what we think, what we overthink, what we think should be and shouldn't be in guides. We mentioned this morning, Rob, a lot about, what's my guide called?
Hmm.
What are they called? And I know I've had experience of my guides when I first, when I was first doing this and got connected with a few guides, and it was wonderful, and it still is. I'm very grateful for all of them. And that's another thing we need to do is be grateful. That
Yeah.
raises your vibration. But when I asked my guide, well, what's your name? And they said, yeah, sure. And it, so that yeah, through telepathy, I can understand it. But it was a high pitched squeaking voice. And then we learn more about when we think about light language. Everything is a sound and a frequency. And if we're connecting with the higher realms, we shouldn't be expecting them to kind of, I'm going to say, stoop to our level. So that's another bit of, say, resistance in
Mm.
this. And even coming into this, Rob, is almost like a separation of things. Of we think those guides are something completely separate to us, or if somebody else channels Archangel Michael, for instance, we think that they should come to us. But I actually can see there's a few, they'll probably, the real Archangel Michael will probably only, I don't know, step in front of a few people. And one of the things we really need to do before we ever want to connect to guides is clear this resistance and actually clear our energy fields of the clutter, of the lower, the fear, any frequencies to do with that, which will help raise our frequency. So whenever somebody says raise your frequency, it's almost all about dropping the lower frequencies. Just such as
Hmm.
um, anxiety, fear. It's not that if you're anxious you can't connect, but it's worth getting rid of that because that's all, again, what we want to be clearing for this, to help us navigate this earth. With connecting with the guides, we sometimes ask the wrong questions. It's not about kind of winning the lottery, but it's also
Mm.
not about, well, what's my purpose, guide? Because that's the separation as well, isn't it? Have you got anything more to say on that, Rob? I know you had experience when you first were working with me with
Yeah,
your first guides, and then how suddenly all the guides came as soon as you let go of the
yeah,
expectation, the resistance of, I want to connect with this guide, and oh, not quite sure about this guide. What
yeah.
was your experience?
I had all that. I mean, I got my first guide fairly quickly,
Mm,
but I didn't believe it for a while.
mm,
I was able to connect. I could eventually visualize, although the visualization changed. And I
mm.
think it's quite important, just before I go on with that story, is that guides will show themselves to us as we can understand them quite often
Yes, yeah.
when they're visualized, because they are energy forms from different dimensions. So they don't necessarily look like us,
Mm, mm.
but they will make an effort to look like something we can recognize,
Yes, yeah.
you know, which again needs some people to go, well, those look like people. Yeah, yeah, they're doing that for you to help you. That's okay. So anyway, I got my first guide and it took me a couple of weeks to go, yeah, all right, I'll take you on then. And that was my own resistance, my own separation, all those things playing in there. But once I had accepted that I had a guide I could connect to, all the other guides that I needed at the time just tumbled in. In fact, I remember doing a piece of automatic writing and they just came one after the other. And I had 8 guides with names, with functions. Yeah. Many of those guides I don't have recourse to because I don't need to.
Mm.
And plenty of others have come in. You were talking about language a minute ago. I have 2 Arcturian guides who I call Peter and Paul. They told me to call them Peter and Paul because I can't speak Arcturian. And they find this hysterically funny. Every time they appear
Yeah.
to me, they chuckle about Peter and Paul because, remember, there's lots of humor out there.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
So you're right, Julie. It's about expectation when you connect up. Don't expect that an archangel will appear in front of you with wings and a halo and possibly a rainbow of lights behind them. Don't
Yep.
expect that because that is not the reality of an angelic energy. They might allow you to see something of that if they're trying to reach you and think they can. So if your vibration is high enough to connect to a guide, just, and there are degrees of energy, aren't there? How we
Yes.
can raise ourselves. So
Mm.
if you raise your frequency a little, you might just be able to just get something from your guides. If you raise your energy a little more, you might get a whole lot more from your guides because they can then connect more clearly with you. But
Absolutely.
expect them to look like all sorts of things and don't be alarmed by it. Really, I mean, I think I've told you this before. I have a connection with the Archangel Azrael,
Yeah.
and I didn't ask for it, it just came. And I see Azrael in a certain way, which is cross-legged sitting in fire. And I once, a year or so ago, said, okay, what do you actually look like? And the response was, are you absolutely sure you want to know this? And I said, show me as much as I can cope with. And what I saw was both thrilling and terrifying because he went from being a sort of humanoid being sat in this ball of fire to being an energy so terrifying in its enormity
Mm.
that I realized that if I misread this energy, I could use it destructively
Mm-hmm.
as much as I could use it constructively. So that was a wake up call for me as to how I see guides.
Yeah.
And it's better for me not to see Azrael as Azrael exists in energy form because it's too much.
Yeah. Too much for a
So
human.
I'm quite happy that he remains cross-legged in that ball of fire.
Yes.
That's just fine for
Yes.
me, thank you. I can communicate quite well.
Yeah. Definitely. Yeah.
Yeah. What do you think?
Yeah, definitely. I think that's why the guides, a guide who is all for you and for helping you, thrive on this land, have a better life. That's all the guides want for us, to raise our frequency so much that everything's wonderful, a wonderful life. That's really all about it. So this is where, our discernment can come in again, coming into kind of, separation is that
Mm,
I'm just going to say once again about this expectation of thinking that, you want to connect with an angelic guide. And instead of trying and trying to connect with an angelic guide, why not just allow things to come in? Because I often get the phrase I get from my guides is all is not as it seems. So you may be it's actually very easy to connect to what you think might be something of the light and angelic. And this is no fear. The reason I want to do this is no fear. We've mentioned this before, but in actual fact, it can be so easy through the false matrix to for things to present themselves as guides, and all they will do is mislead you. All they will do is probably say a load of words, and when they're finished, you're thinking, what did that actually mean? Did that actually mean anything? And they'll say all the right words, we're
mm,
going to work in love and light, I'm going to do this, going to do that. And it actually, you're thinking, I'm not really sure what I'm going to do about that. That's not that's when you can discern that it's not quite the right feeling. Okay. And the
yeah,
better feeling is when you can connect telepathically. So it's almost that when you connect with the guides and they start bringing messages to you, the downloads, when you have an absolute knowing of things. There's in these podcasts, and this goes on YouTube, there's so much to talk about to actually connect with guides. We can't possibly well, we've got plenty of time to talk about things. We can't possibly talk about absolutely everything, but when people are in our sessions, we can we provide a container that we can oversee and get these beautiful, these people to get these beautiful downloads of just
mm,
that knowing and an overwhelming sense of, say, love. That's when you usually know that there's a difference there, and that's what we're really looking for.
for
um
sure.
yeah.
Yeah.
So
I
are
think
these,
people also
yeah.
often ask or wonder, Julie, where are they from, these guides?
mm, mm,
Old school thinking, have they come down from heaven? Do they live in the
mm,
clouds somewhere? Or what? And of course, we're at a low end of dimensional existence down here in the 3D world. And many of us now are aware of more dimensions and can move to those dimensions,
yeah. Yeah.
at least telepathically or mentally, or spiritually, however you want to
And
look at that
consciously,
process.
yeah, it's our
Yeah,
conscious
consciously.
that
That's a
can
better
move.
word. Thank
Yeah,
you.
yeah.
Yeah. But the guides exist on all sorts of dimensions in different
Mm,
ways.
mm,
So, as I was saying earlier, they don't look like you or I look because
no,
their energy forms on a different dimension. And, people or beings of that dimension will see them differently to the way we see them.
yeah,
But your guides could be as simple as your ancestral family, your biological ancestral family that has passed over and is still connected.
yeah,
They can be angelic beings.
yeah.
They can be intergalactic beings because we're not talking absolutely about little green men in a spaceship who land on your
Mm,
front lawn at night and
mm,
scare you. We're talking about beings who live and are able to use dimension to
yes.
move themselves.
Mm,
So whether they come from a different planet or not doesn't really matter. They're out there in their droves. So my two Arcturians travel on light very simply
yeah. Mm-hmm.
and easily and allow me to do the same when I connect to them.
Yeah,
I can't do that without them, but I can do that with them.
yeah,
So that's a question of my frequency and me raising my vibration enough for them to connect. So I think it's keeping an open mind and not
yeah.
needing to know where they come from, just accepting that you have so much greater knowledge available to you and that there's all these levels of existence that you can connect with should you wish to and should you
Mm,
have reason to.
mm. Yeah, I
All about
do think,
intention. Yeah.
yeah, I do. Oh, intention is a good one. I
Mm.
do think when we overthink it, that's when that is when
Mm.
things don't work, or when we trying to interpret something. This interpretation thing. You can only interpret what they give you based on what you know already. We only
Yep.
know what we only know. So there's
Yep.
been many a time in my experience when I've had a download and immediately I'm interpreting it as something else. It's not even a knowing. It might just be a download that I've written, like like automatic writing, or something that they've given to
Yeah.
me, said to me, and I need to write it out afterwards, where I'll think, oh, it's about this and about so and so, and then as I go on a few days later, it's like, actually, I realise now it's not about that. It's an extension of that, and that's why we also have to be, not, this awareness that we don't we don't know half of it. We don't even know a small
I know.
proportion of it. Us as human beings are this tiny, tiny, fractal of who our soul is, who our higher self is, and who, what the whole universe consists of. That I know that we have to continually learn for this. So, we just have to, absolutely, as Rob said, keep an open mind, because the more you just allow things to let go and have I'm going to say, even an empty space, the universe inside you, just empty space, the more we can allow lots and lots of things to come through, rather than trying it, which actually creates the disconnection. The disconnection is in this: I'm frustrated. I have tried so much. I'm doing this. It happens all the time, even though I do it. Over the last, a couple of weeks ago, I was getting frustrated because I'm thinking, I've not actually had anything for a while. And then I'm getting into that downward spiral of what's going
Hmm.
on. There must be something wrong. I must be doing this wrong. But then as soon as you do something and let go, and don't get me wrong, you can even be in a meditation and think you've let go and you're still not getting anything.
Hmm.
That's good as well, because that's probably just upgrading you without you knowing. Sometimes things are there without you knowing. And again, just going back to this, the experience I've had in terms of all is not as it seems. I've connected with some guides that, you would think, oh, they're horrendous, they look horrid, they look horrendous. I've had, mantis experiences, or is there another look like kind of they look like a kind of dragon stroke reptilian, not even any of that. And I've checked and checked, and they're malevolent. They're absolutely fine. And it's almost like that, where we, this separation, where we put, we judge a book by its cover. And again, this is not what they want from us. We the other side to this is, we may be those galactic, we may have had that family, or we may be within that family. So a lot of the time it's just literally your soul family, whether that's galactic, whether that's our soul family from our human members of
Hmm.
family, the human DNA connection there, that just, they're here to get, to help us, to give messages to us, to help us thrive, to help us move away from, I'm going to say this, entrapment. But remember, that's not, the only entrapment is when we're in fear, and when we're allowing that entrapment to happen, not being aware that it's happening. And that's it. So that's it, to just move away from it all. And that will take time to learn. All the time I am learning new things.
Yeah.
Even through last week, there are some things that I thought I'd sorted, I thought I knew about, and I had a whole host of new information come in, and thinking, ah, I really was in denial. I was avoiding it, and I was obviously resisting it, thinking, oh yes, I know all about it. So it comes back to the arrogance and ignorance of who we are. So it comes down almost to just raising your vibration,
Yeah.
feeling gratitude for it, allowing it to, just letting go of all your expectations of what it should and shouldn't be, to allow these beautiful guides, including, we're talking about within your high self, to
Yeah.
come through. So and literally, anybody who's frightened of connecting with guides, just think about connecting with your soul and higher self, because don't forget, you're already connecting with ego, that's a guide, mind, that's a guide. But how's that going for you so far?
Hmm.
With an ego that might be in fear, and a mind that
Yeah.
might be, trying to put logical things
Yeah.
into what is not logical. So just remember that.
Yeah, absolutely. You've really just said exactly what I was going to say.
Yeah.
In terms of what do we do? So, we arrive at the end of this podcast, and I hope you're a bit the wiser
Hmm.
if you're listening. Um, you're absolutely right. Instead of saying I need to meet my guides because they have messages for me and I'm quite important and I need to know these things, you need to raise your vibration.
Yeah.
Before you do anything, you need to raise your vibration. So you need to shed the lower vibrations, allow yourself to rise a bit, and then connecting to guides is a whole lot easier
Yeah.
because you
Absolutely.
have raised to their level or nearer their level. So
Yeah.
perhaps think of that more than you think of connecting to your guides initially.
Mm.
And then when you start to make contact, off you go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Comes
And
in
if you
thick and
do,
fast.
tell us.
Yeah. Yeah.
Tell us
It's
who you've met and
absolutely
what they've got
wonderful.
for you, because that would be
Mm.
fascinating to know. We've all got, different people, but some of us have the same people as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We can share
Yeah.
guides as well if we're in that, if I'm going to go at DNA, if we're in that soul, that kind of what we'd call a soul group, if we're in that group,
Yeah.
you can. Remembering that if we're not in that group, usually you can't. So just an end note, for anybody out there that think, sort of wanting to connect to, I'm just going to say something like Palladians, for instance, or something like that. Unless
Yeah.
you have, I'm going to say the DNA, unless you're in that soul group, you're probably not going to connect to them. And this is where you're resisting it, thinking you want to
Mm.
connect to something instead of allowing something else to connect. And also knowing, just like humans, other guides, not all Palladians are good. Some of them can be, not necessarily bad, but like humans can have other agendas. Not all greys are bad. They can have different agendas, things like that. If every,
Yeah.
for those who want to connect with galactics, other than that, just rely on your own soul, your high self, but know that also they're trying to connect, knowing that we've got some of these ego issues still to constantly
Yeah.
check on. Always be something that you can clear without going into too much of making that your life, because we've got to live a life as well on that
Indeed.
end
So do it with
note.
lightness and do it with gratitude and just see where you go.
Yeah. Okay, I think that's a wrap, Rob.
I think so. Be
Okie
back next
doke.
week with a whole lot more.
Yep, hope you've enjoyed
Yeah.
this. Bye for now.
Bye bye.